Okay, so good morning. Yeah, as you can see on my slide, so for 22 years I've been working only on augmented reality, and I'm sure I'll work 22 more years. So I wanted to show you, share a little my perspective, so what I learned in the last 22 years and where I think it's going. And also you can see I have several positions, and I hope all of them will be clear during my talk. Okay, so let me start. So in these 22 years that I worked with augmented reality, first I want to show you what I think was the best thing I did. And that was in 2011. So for that we got a prize. So we got the best demo award at the #1 AR, augmented reality conference. And so what is this? So you can see we had users, and the users wear some AR glasses, and they can look at their hands, and we set their hands on fire. So it looks like this. So you can see this is very, very high quality. So you can see there's this volumetric fire, and as you move, the fire in very high detail reacts to your fingers. And this was a big technical achievement at that time, and I'm not going to go into the technical details, but what was very interesting, because we showed this at the conference, like 3 days maybe, and I think 100 people used the system. And then a significant portion of the people using the system said our hands are getting hot. And I think with hindsight it's logical that this happens, but we didn't expect this at all. We just the computer graphics people, and we want to make some funny demo, but we didn't think that people would feel hot actually. And then after, we did some experiments about that. Could you turn up the volume a little, please? And basically just we let people use the system and asked them to speak out aloud what they feel, and we just recorded that. Maybe I let you hear what the people are saying.
Wow.
Basically, we did this kind of a little serious experiment, and we found that about 1/3 of people, it works. 1/3 of people will say it's hot, and some people have no reaction at all. But that was very surprising for us. Okay, so this just as a quick teaser. So now let me zoom out a little and speak a little about the theory, and Wendy has shown that already. So it's Milgram and Kishino. So in 1994, they made this kind of taxonomy. And you can see on the one end, we have reality. So just everything we see is real. On the other side is virtual reality. So everything we see is computer graphics. And there's some blend in between. And this blend is especially what I'm interested in. But now let's think about reality. So what is happening? So always we have some light sources. So the sun or some artificial light source. It creates some light. Then the light bounces off in our environment. And then we have this very complex wave field around us of the light, typically called the light field. And then this light field enters our eye and brain, and something happens to us, right? Or we perceive our environment. And now there are these terms, augmented and virtual reality, which is now becoming very popular. So I feel very lucky that 22 years ago I chose to work on augmented reality. But you see the difference already. So in augmented reality, well, you can see the person's eyes, right? So it's a difference because they have a clear view of their environment, plus we add some computer graphics. Then on the other end, you see virtual reality. It's where you are isolated from your environment. So you see that you are really blocked. And I mean, here you see this basically we have some light field coming from the environment, and then ideally we want some AR glasses, which also create a light field, and mixes these two light fields together as we want them. And in the virtual reality case, it's much simpler, because just we have the glasses, and the glasses make some light field, but they don't care about, you don't need to care about the light field in the environment. And now in this playing field, like what are the things that interest me? So these are a couple of my research questions that I've been following. So one thing I'm very interested in is to create augmented reality displays that make it possible to have graphics which are indistinguishable from real objects. Actually, we have done some experiments like that, where we show some real objects and next to it a computer graphics object, and then we ask people to say which one is the computer graphics object. And in some experiments, we could really fool people, that they could not say anymore what is real, what is virtual. So that is, I think, an enormous technical challenge. Because, of course, we can only do it in some very limited special case situation, but not in general, right? So I could not now make a copy of Wendy and then say which is the real Wendy. So we are not there yet. But I think in, I don't know, 5, 10 years, we will be there, I think. And then another thing I'm interested in, so number 2, so while you use such a system that blends these light fields together, then what will it do to our brain while we use the system? And also, I mean, are there after effects? So what happens if you use some AR system, let's say to improve some things of your personality or some things of your body, like will there be after effects? So when you take off the glasses, are there some persistent effects? So these are kind of my main research questions. And now to address these research questions, well, I had to study many fields, and I'm still studying. Because of course, to understand the human side, I need to learn about psychology, and recently also about neuroscience, so really what is our brain doing in these kind of systems. And a lot of technology, because what sounds simple in a way, so this kind of schema, what technology is involved? So you need computer graphics, you need computer vision, because you need to understand your environment. You need optics, because you need to make better AR glasses. You need embedded computing. Wendy was showing in a talk about Google Glass, and it's really this small thing. And how do you do computations in there efficiently? So you need specialized chips. Of course, nowadays, deep learning, yeah, so many things you cannot do anymore without deep learning. And also, let's say, in the end, we want to make applications to help people, maybe a doctor, and you want to support the doctor during a surgery. So then, of course, the user interface needs to be very, very usable, right? So if it's not nice to use, it will not be accepted. And the next part of my talk now, I want to show you a bunch of projects that I've done. And I think this makes a little clearer all of these terms on these slides. So let me start with the first cluster of projects. And this is something I started in 2009, so a long time ago. And I'm still working on that. It's kind of interesting. So, but there what we did is, okay, so imagine you walk outside and you look at the wall, but you know what is behind the wall. Then in this situation, as you can see on the bottom, so we can create a kind of X-ray view so that we can look through buildings. So it looks like this. So this was a very clunky backpack computer. So you could walk outside, and then you can look through buildings. And I mean, here now to go to perception, right? I mean, how is this image generated? Because in a way, we have two layers, right? We have the wall, and we know what's behind. But how can we combine them in a way that the human brain can interpret that correctly? And the way we do it is, as you can see, we highlight strong visual elements in the foreground. So the wall has many edges. So we highlight these edges. And this helps us to understand that A, there is a wall, and that B, that the wall is in front of this courtyard behind it. And yes, and I've been following this for a while. And then happily, in 2014, I got a Google Faculty Award to bring this kind of X-ray system to Google Glass. And it was a very tough project because I think Google Glass, they made several mistakes. Because I think it was absolute genius in a way. Because look at that, I mean, the Dalai Lama and Barack Obama, they're wearing these devices. I don't think you can find many AR, VR devices that people like this would wear. Right? So I think it's a masterpiece of industrial design. Because also you can drop it on the floor and it doesn't get much damage. It's quite remarkable. So why didn't this succeed? So my theory is two things. So one thing is, I think Google made a big blunder how they released it, because they released it in San Francisco, in that area, and there's a big divergence. You have very, very rich people and also many poor people. And then the rich people walk around with their Google glasses, yeah? And of course this led to some tensions, right? That then maybe some poorer people would attack the Google Glass people and try to steal their glasses, and I don't know. And then they termed also, the new term was made even there, like a glass holes, combination of Google Glass and asshole. So that was one, I think, sociological mistake to release it like that. I think it would have been much smarter to test it in industrial settings, right? In some factory or something like that, not on the streets in downtown San Francisco. And the other problem is it's monocular. So you can see it's only covering one eye and making graphics for one eye. And I was wearing Google Glass maybe for 6 months, nonstop. And I had to stop wearing it because I got eye problems. And why is that? So, because it was also interesting. So, right, so one eye gets computer graphics. And I see now I can see some object. Then for this eye, everything is normal. Yeah, it sees it sees some object, it's fine. But the other eye sees nothing. And that leads to something, so you basically, there are many dynamic mechanisms that your eyes are doing all the time, right? So they kind of sync together. And this just breaks down. If you suddenly have that only one eye can see things and the other eye cannot see things. So I had, interestingly, my problems were in the eye which did not get computer graphics. And now that I learned more about this, it's clear. It's clear. Such a display cannot work. And I'm surprised Google didn't realize that. Okay, but still, so I had this project and I was happy, and so I show you what we did in this project. So basically, the scenario we wanted to do, because at that time I worked in Japan, and Japan, there are many earthquakes. And let's say you have an earthquake, a building breaks down, and then you have responders going into that building. And then we wanted to use X-ray vision, right? So there are a team of responders, they can see each other, they can see through walls, etc. But then there's the challenge that you have no knowledge of the environment. Right? So the first system I showed you, we made a careful 3D model of the courtyard, so we could do this X-ray vision. And now in this, so now you can see this is the view of one person, and the person could either look straight, then they can again look through the wall, or they can look down, and then they can see like a miniature 3D world of the environment. And that we built totally on the fly. It's quite I think, quite interesting, yeah, but you can see basically, you have a person going into the room, and then on the fly, we make a 3D model, and also we project the user's view onto the 3D model to support them. Yes, so and mainly, I think my perspective, this project was fighting with Google Glass, because Google Glass, in essence, is like a smartwatch that you wear in your face. So that is the design goal, right? It gives you some notifications, maybe you can see a text message, something like that. But it was not made for doing that, doing high-end 3D computer graphics and computer vision. So we were fighting a lot with that. Yeah? So we built a custom heat sink for Google Glass, and I don't know. Okay, then what else have I been doing? So as I get older, I have a lot of back problems. And then my doctor is giving me these kind of instructions. So these are the exercises I should be doing. And well, I guess 100 years ago, probably doctors would have done that similarly, right? But now we're in a new age, and why we still use these kind of instructions. And how I think how they should look like is maybe more something like this. So we can look into our own body, and we can see some cause and effect. Let's say I do some stretching exercise. Let's say here's just a simple example. So I move my arm, and it shows which muscles get activated. But you can imagine for some stretching exercise or for some other things, right? It could help patients to understand why they do the exercise. And maybe what are the things where they need to watch out. And these are now continuing. So currently I have a project with, because my last job was in Hong Kong, so I work with a veterinarian college there, and also with Professor Nawab from TU Munich. And Professor Nawab is a very big guy for using augmented reality with humans. So during surgery, currently some of his systems are in the US getting FDA approval to be really used in surgery theaters. But now the idea is to use this for animals, so veterinary medicine. And so what are we doing then? So interestingly now, as I learned about veterinarian medicine, a lot of things are done with palpation. Because let's say for humans, let's say if my back acts up and I have very bad back problems, probably is able to do a CT scan or an MRI scan, or there's some image-giving procedure to look into my body. So not with animals. With animals, you can also do that, but it's unusual. So lots of things are found out with palpation. So palpation, that is basically that you push on the skin of the animal and try to feel the organs and muscles, and you can, like that, kind of look inside. So medical students, veterinarian students, do that a lot. And now our idea was, why couldn't we use X-ray? Because then, with augmented reality X-ray, they can look inside the animal, and they can actually see what they are touching. And this is basically just starting, so I can show you a recent movie. So it's Chao Chu Wang, currently one of my students in Hong Kong. And you see, okay, this is just some simple test, but you can see this little dog puppet, and you can look inside the dog and see the organs, and can see what he's touching. Okay, and I think I will still continue this, of course. So this was now the first cluster of things I did that I wanted to show you. So it's all about this augmented reality X-ray, so combining real and virtual and looking into things. And then also in my career, I spent some time in Japan. And there I got another idea, which I explained to you now, which is more about using augmented reality for entertainment. So in 2011 or 12, I saw this in Japan. And I was very astonished, because this is a video, this is made by hobbyists. These are not researchers, this is not a company, these are hobbyists. And these are people who like this character. So I don't know, it is some cartoon character, and they really, really like this cartoon character, so they built an AR system. And this is extremely powerful, this system. Because first of all, I mean, it can detect things. So it could detect, okay, there's a motorcycle. And then also, as you observe the character, when the character is behind the motorcycle will correctly occlude that character. So they also have a 3D reconstruction running. It is quite a technical achievement that they made there. And why? Why did they do that? Only so that in the end, they can have this cartoon character in their kitchen or in their living room, and they can interact with that cartoon character in their house. So that got me really thinking, so there is a huge entertainment value, right? So if you can take things out of the screen and into your real environment. So that is something really, I think, that touches the essence of humanity, or what people like. Then in Japan, I did some research, and then I found that Japan has, interestingly, a very old tradition of ghosts. Like thousands of years, there's a written record of yokai. And this is a type of ghost which is tied to objects. It's very interesting. So in Japan, you have many of these kind of sliding doors. And then there's this kind of eye ghost, which appears in the sliding doors. Or there's another ghost, which is tied to umbrellas. And all different kinds of objects. And then I thought, this sounds good for augmented reality, because augmented reality, we want to combine graphics with the real world. And also we have a web page about this. So you can see, so for example, this is a very classical painting of such a ghost from Hokusai. Maybe you know it's the Great Wave of his most famous painting. Okay, so maybe I just show you. So we found basically a temple in Kyoto. It's also like a 500-year-old temple, Zen temple. And they agreed that we can make some augmented reality ghost story in their temple. So let me show you this one. And it's a very beautiful temple. And basically you can walk around in the temple and you can experience some ghost story in there. So this is, for example, the shoe ghost, because when you enter the temple, you need to take off your shoes. And you can see some other ghosts, and yeah, you can really walk around the temple and experience some story. So, and that I think was quite a nice thing, actually. It was quite a nice system. But then I started thinking, okay, now we can do this in a temple. But what about if we can do this kind of experience over a city scale? So all over a city. And then I had a PhD student, and basically he worked out how to make this bigger. So the idea is we want to have a game. And now this is in Osaka, so one of the biggest cities in Japan, and all over the city, this game was working. So you could play it in the subway, at day, at night. But I'll get later into more details, so it didn't really quite work as we wanted. But
our game works over large.
Could you please turn the volume down a little?
Our game works over large scale.
And you can see it's like meant as a multiplayer game, and all the players are kind of in a shared world, and we can overlay this game over the city. Of course, also we got friends with the Japanese police, because they had a group of people wearing strange glasses walking around the center. So, yeah. But we'll revisit that. Yeah? But I think this is definitely a great vision, and of course many companies are working now on that. But one thing we discovered in this kind of game, so one problem is the input, because now we have HoloLenses, so we have very nice computer graphics, but how do you interact with the game? And so basically, what I think what's a very good way is to use radar. So in 2016, Google announced the Soli chip, which is like a miniaturized radar chip. And radar has many good features. Like one thing is, yeah, it can go through objects. Because of course, normally you use it to track planes or things like that, right? Really huge objects. But Google's idea was to use it for detecting micro gestures. So you can see here on the bottom, it's for controlling a radio or things like that, that you can do very fine gestures, and with radar you can detect. And then we used that to make a bunch of serious work. So you can see, for example, this is like a typical AR application. So you have some mechanic. The mechanic is repairing some engine. And then we can overlay him instructions. But how does the mechanic interact with the system? So imagine you have some progress slider or things like that. So how can the mechanic fluidly interact while he's repairing the engine? And our idea was, yeah, we could use radar and micro gestures. Because you can see, if you look at the sum of the mechanic, let's say he wants to control a slider, then, well, maybe just the current workpiece where his hand is, he can slide directly on that object. So we did many serious things. But now, going back to what I showed earlier about entertainment, so also we used the radar to make some more entertainment and funny things. So basically, we used it to make a scratch interface. So I don't know if you know what scratching is. So here is a world champion to show you what that is. But basically, you have two turntables. They both play some songs. And you can mix and scratch with it. So basically, scratching is moving the record back and forth. And now this is a very huge setup, right? And then we thought with radar, maybe we can make it mobile. Oh, sorry. Yes. And then our system looked like that. So you can see here we have another scratch guy, and then he's got a speaker, and he's got the radar sensor in his pocket, and he's got a laptop in his backpack. And then basically, yeah, he could walk. Can you turn up the music a little, please? So basically, yeah, you can walk around. He could walk around outside and play music. And of course, then the question is this easy or difficult to do? So it's my daughter who is 6 months old, and she could use that. And it's quite interesting because you see here, this is this radar chip, or the radar prototype board, and it's really picking up her movements. And with very low latency, like a few millisecond latency, her movements trigger sounds. So can you turn it up a little so we can hear that one? I think it's important to hear the sound. Ah. Okay, let's go to my daughter. Okay, maybe it's difficult to hear. But it's really, this is no fake, yeah? This is really live recorded from the laptop. Okay, so now I explained to you about X-ray vision, and I explained to you about entertainment. So now I want to go back to the burning hand, because I showed you we worked on this 2011, but still have work going on for that. Because the experiment we did in 2013 was, now with hindsight, I think, very naive. Yeah? Just we let people use it, and they speak out aloud. But of course, it's very unreliable if you ask people, right? Because people often maybe don't want to tell the truth. There are many complications for asking people. So it's, I think, better to measure their body directly. And in this experiment, what we did now, I have a PhD student now in Hong Kong, and he is, basically his mission is to measure the bodily reactions to the fire. And in this experiment, he measured blood flow. It's interesting, there's a thing called laser Doppler fluorometer. And what that can do, it can measure the blood flow in your body in real time. And our idea is, yeah, we set people's hands on fire, and we measure the blood flow in their body. And then you can see here's a plot, and you can see there's a huge spike, and this is when we turn the fire on. So it means this is, I think, maybe the first proof where we show that this AR fire causes our body to react the same way. Because if your hand really burns, your body will send blood there to cool down your hand. And exactly the same thing happens with our virtual fire. So it's interesting. And now the student doing more and more experiments. So now currently he's doing one with using EEG. So basically directly measure the brain while we use the fire. And this is not yet published, but I can show you some very amazing result. So in the experiment that we are doing, yeah, we do EEG with the people, and we set their hands on fire. And then now we have two conditions. So one is just our standard fire. And then we thought as a control condition, we make a fake fire. Yeah? So it's green, it's the wrong color. The physics are wrong because the fire is going downward. And also we try to recreate the sound. So we played some sound which kind of sounds like fire sound, but isn't. So spectral analysis, and it kind of has the same signature like a fire sound, but it's not a fire sound. And what we expected is, well, in this case, not much will happen. And in the realistic fire, a lot of things will happen. Turns out we were totally wrong. So the green fire, or green fake fire, and the real fire, our brain reacts exactly the same way. And this is very astonishing, I think. And because what it tells me, I think, is that there is something built into our brain that can detect this kind of flow pattern, right? Because the flow is still similar, like to a real fire. So our body can detect that. So we don't care about the color. So it's all about this dynamic motion to detect a fire, I think. But we need to do more experiments. All right, so now I'm halfway through. So I spoke about my last 22 years, what I've been doing. And I left out many things because I don't have enough time. So, but mainly I focused on these two, on the X-ray and on the burning hand. Now something I haven't spoken about at all yet, so it's kind of and this is now important for the second part of my talk. So it's kind of the history of where I'm coming from. So most of my life I spent in Munich, so up to my PhD. And then after that, I got Wanderlust and I went out in the world. So I spent some time in Japan, and then Australia, and then back to Japan, and then Hong Kong, and finally Paris. And I think now I will speak about the future of where I think augmented reality is going. And then I think it's important, this kind of especially Asian view on that. And of course, Marcel Proust said something nice. Yeah? So the purpose of traveling is not to see new things, but to get new eyes. And I think with my track record, I hope I got quite brand new eyes. And so now I just came to Paris, actually 4 months ago. And there I'm co-directing the team Venice, which Wendy mentioned indirectly in her talk, because she was showing the EVE system, which is this double stereoscopic cave system. Yes, and so I'm just new here, so today I won't show many things from that team, but I hope next time I give a talk here, I will show many interesting things we did in the team. And also one of our teams, so Jean, actually came today. Thanks, Jean. Okay, so now the next 22 years. What's going to happen? My honest observation, I think, is that US and China are very, very much ahead of Europe. And especially China, I think, is very, very far ahead. Maybe Europe cannot catch them, but I hope they can. It's also one reason why I came here, because I want to help Europe to catch up versus America and China. And now I will speak briefly about America, because I think it's quite easy to find. Yeah? You can look online, Google, and so on. You can find out what Microsoft and so on are doing. But China is much more complicated, so I speak much more about China. But first, very quickly about the US. So here's like a short list of AR, VR-related investments that happened recently. And probably the biggest one you heard is about the Metaverse initiative from what used to be Facebook, what's now Meta. And there's some estimates that now 20% of all Facebook employees work on AR and VR. It's quite amazing if you think about it, how much manpower and how much effort there is. And of course, America being America, of course, this immediately also goes to the military. So there's already for a couple of years, there's a big trial with Microsoft HoloLens being used in the US military. Okay, so US, many big things happen. So now I want to speak about China. So my last job was in Hong Kong. So I show you a quick, so basically here's Hong Kong. So this is where my school was and where I was working. And then very near is the Shenzhen, which is called the Silicon Valley of hardware. It's a very, very impressive place. And then I had this position as augmented reality evangelist. So this was in Guangzhou. And this whole area is one of the most densely populated areas in the world. And it's all very near together. So for example, to give you a sense of the scale. So from Hong Kong to go to Macau, it will take 30 minutes by speedboat. Or to go from Hong Kong to Shenzhen, also 30 minutes. And to go from Hong Kong to Guangzhou, where I had my position, or I still have, it's about 1 hour by high-speed train. Yes, so there are all these places. And okay, I think maybe I don't go through all the statistics, but it's a really interesting area. Yeah? Because I guess all the phones we have in our pockets are all manufactured there, I guess, almost all of them. And yeah, there's just enormous factories, enormous manufacturing power. Okay, so now I quickly show you a short movie about Shenzhen to give you an idea how this looks like. Sorry, more volume, please. Also very interesting. Do you know this guy? Anybody? Andrew Wani Hung? So he's a guy. He got a $1 million prize. And how did he do that? So he was the one who hacked the Xbox. So Microsoft made the Xbox as a gaming console, and they sold them too cheap, right? So they sold them underpriced. Because the idea, yeah, people buy the Xbox and then they will buy many games. But then some philanthropists realized, yeah, but hold on. So now we have all the developing countries who don't have enough computers. So if there's a way that we can install all kinds of software on the Xbox, it would be an enormous gift for the developing countries. But of course, Microsoft did their best to lock down the Xbox, that people cannot install arbitrary things on the Xbox. But he made it happen. And he got a $1 million prize for that. And if you learn about Shenzhen, you understand the only reason why he could do that is because Shenzhen.
This is a market we're going to. Walking in, I really highly suggest you just hold the camera down by your side like it's off. They're very strict about no camera policy. It's so busy. A lot of the parts are remanufactured, recycled. Some are new, some are fake. Replacement batteries and screens for Samsung tablets, backings for Samsung tablets. And then you see back over there, see those big chests of safes over there? All cash. If you want to buy cases for your iPhone to sell like new, you can buy empty boxes. These are just empty boxes they're selling. So this woman is selling iPhone 5Cs. Those are not new, but authentic. They're used and recycled. Another guy here swapping out parts casually. All the tools you need to repair phones, like the vacuum
But this is basically a free documentary on YouTube. So if you have a chance, I think it's very, very enlightening to see what's happening there. Because I think only in Shenzhen, I think no other place in the world, you have this kind of ecosystem of hardware hacking. Okay, and then I want to speak more about this one. So I want to lead you to my position there as AR evangelist. So, because I mentioned a little about the investments that happen in the US, and that also there are some investments in Europe, but the ones in China are like many orders of magnitude more, which is a little scary. So this is China, and then here on the bottom, you can see this is the playing field I explained on the last slide, but China is very big. And now this is some overview of major government projects in China related to AR and VR. And you can see there are so many. And I show you just two. What is kind of the volume of money they are putting into that. So you see here 1.2 billion euro and 600 million euro and an end. So this is like maybe, I don't know, $10 billion investment. And I don't think Europe or America or anybody has something like that. So this is very remarkable. And then they have explicitly like 4 or 5 competence centers for AR and VR, and in the one on the bottom here, so this is where my position is as augmented reality evangelist. And I want to quickly show you the things we're doing there. Sorry, Chinese slides. So one thing, for example, is to develop new AR displays. Because currently, I guess the best ones you can buy in a way is the Microsoft HoloLens, but yeah, it's American, right? So of course, China tries to copy that. And you see, I mean, there are rotary stages, linear stages, high-speed cameras to measure the motion to photon latency. So let me explain that quickly. So this is a very important concept for augmented reality. So let's say I have this bottle in my field of view, and I want to overlay a box around it. Then as my head moves, then of course in the glasses, the box also has to move in order to stay on top of that bottle. And now this delay between when I move my head and when the graphics are updated, this is called motion to photon latency. And normally, like good devices have about 10 milliseconds motion to photon latency. So, and you need to measure this very exactly. So this is one thing. Other one is about creating photorealistic captures of humans. And of course, Hollywood has solved that already. So also now this is getting copied. So basically Paul Debevec's light stage, which comes from Stanford and was first used, I believe, in the Matrix movies. So yeah, but basically they have that, so you can very photorealistically capture people. And yeah, then you can do things like virtual bands and whatnot. And another big thing is about theme parks. So I don't know if you know, but so in China, they are still building cinemas like crazy. They don't have enough cinemas. So a lot of, as I say, basic infrastructure which we have here, like, they are still building. And one thing they build are theme parks, like crazy. And because of licensing issues and so on, so they don't want to make everything Mickey Mouse, but they want to make their own content. And they want to make everything based on AR and VR. Because of course, you can make the theme park much more entertaining, right? Because you build a physical thing, but then you can blend it with digital content, which gives you much more freedom what you do. And actually, so on this webpage also, you can download some applications if you want. Yeah, for example, this is a very classical one, yeah, where you like walk on a plank and then you can really get scared. So actually for me, for example, I cannot use this. This application, I get too scared. It's very strange because you know you're on the ground, but it's so strong, this illusion of being on a skyscraper, so I get very scared when I use that. Okay, so this was a very quick intro about China. But I think other people have done better ones than me. So this is one of my favorite books, so I really recommend to you if you have a chance to read it. And this guy, Kai-Fu Lee, so he's a Singaporean guy who studied at Carnegie Mellon University, did his PhD there, and then became a venture capitalist. And he's investing in China and in America. And it's very interesting in this book. And also I should mention, I trust this guy because I used his software. So in my master thesis, I actually used his software. He wrote the Sphinx speech recognizer. So I felt I can trust this person because I used his code and the code was good. But then, so what is this book about? So he's speaking about China versus US, about deep learning and artificial intelligence. And basically, he says, okay, today, okay, this book is a few years old, but basically, kind of China will overtake America in everything about deep learning, except for business AI. And why is that? So, well, for business, America has been using a long time now SAP and this kind of accounting systems. So there is a lot of digital data. So not in China, there are still many workflows where you have to stamp something or something needs to be on paper. And because of that, they are lacking some data. But for many other areas, especially like autonomous AI and perception AI. So perception AI is this understanding images, understanding graphics, understanding speech. So everything related to perception, which I think is the most interesting AI for my field, is already some years ago China was ahead, and now China is totally ahead. And why is that? I'll try to give some answers. But of course, one thing is about how private data is handled. Say in Europe, so in this whole book, Europe isn't even mentioned. Yeah? So Europe is totally already behind. So why? Well, one thing I thought is because he's a venture capitalist, so he only cares about money and startups and so on. And then I think it's quite well known that in Europe there is not so much venture capital. So it could be one reason he doesn't care about Europe. And the other one, which I think, which is maybe more plausible also, because Europe got the GDPR, right? Which I think is a very good thing, yeah? Don't get me wrong. So I like having the GDPR protect me. But other places don't have that, yeah? So China, America, they don't have that, right? I mean, America maybe now starting, but they don't really have that. So it's much easier to get data of humans, of what they're doing, of their usage patterns, and so on. And that basically, I think privacy is good for us as individuals, but it's very bad for deep learning. Because deep learning, the more data you have, the better it works. And it's not like you have double the data, it works twice as good. No, you have double the data, it works 10 times as good. So it's all about data. And also, you know, in deep learning now, everybody open sources their code. Code is not interesting anymore. It's only about data. Right? With China now, they can open source many things because nobody else has the data they have. Yeah? So it's, and actually yesterday, when kind of the final preparation for my talk, I looked into this lack of venture capital funding in Europe, but it's not so conclusive. So interesting. So I looked at this page, CBS Insights, which has a list of all unicorn companies. Unicorn company is more than $1 billion worth and is privately owned. And then as expected, America is clearly number one with 559, wow. And China, number two. And EU, not so bad actually, 87. But then also, the one surprise for me was, for example, UK. So I should say inside EU, the number 1, I'm happy as a German, is Germany. So they have 26. And number 2 is France. They have 24. So it's kind of head-to-head. But it means a large portion of the startups in Europe are France and Germany. But UK almost has as much as France and Germany together. So I didn't know. So it seems like the UK has a nicer investment climate than the rest of Europe. Okay, but nevertheless, okay, so maybe my theory about there is no venture, because this statistic now, of course, doesn't tell us how were these startups funded. Did they get venture capital, or are these privately owned, or what is the backstory? So we don't really know. I think it needs more research. Okay, and now to drive home the point about China, I need to go back now a little and speak about the technological challenges. So the next 22 years, what are the challenges? I think 2 big ones. So one, and I don't have time to speak about this, because now I mentioned often the head-worn light field display. And that is something which will take 10 to 20 years. It's a very difficult one. And now the one I want to speak in detail today a little is about how to localize the display in space. Because as I explained earlier with my bottle example, for augmented reality to work, we need to know where is the device in space that is doing AR. So how can we localize that? And here I have a little list. So I think these were, for me, the absolute major milestones for this localization problem in augmented reality. So the first one was 1996. This was done by Sony Research in Tokyo. So they developed the first marker tracking system. So this very old movie. It's running on some Silicon Graphics, expensive computer. And then you can do things like that. Pang. So there are these markers, and if a camera sees the marker, we can add some computer graphics to it. So Sony made this in 1996. And then 1999, Professor Kato, who I actually worked with when I worked in Japan, or directed a lab together with him, he made an open source version of that. And many, many researchers, including me, when we started with augmented reality, we used this AR toolkit, which is just an open source re-implementation of Sony cybercode. Then the next big thing, because then 1999, so everybody was using these markers. Then 2007, a thing came called PTAM, which made markers, we didn't need markers anymore. So you can see you have a camera, and the camera can find some nice landmarks in the environment, and it's using these landmarks for tracking. And then you can do things like go to some Zen garden in Kyoto. It's actually near to the place where we made the ghost story, and you can play a game in there. So this was a huge gain. You don't need any markers. You can do it in the real environment. And then the next big thing, I think for me, was Kinect Fusion. And what Kinect Fusion is, this is a thing that makes a 3D reconstruction of our environment in real time. So you see I have a Kinect. I can move the Kinect around in space. And then instantly, as you can see in a moment, it will make a 3D model. So this is also the algorithm we used in the project with Google, for the Google Glass project, to reconstruct the rooms. So now, and then Wendy also mentioned that, so that then the 2015 came the HoloLens from Microsoft, which has these amazing, amazing technical features, which I thought would take 10 years longer. So when this came in 2015, I was extremely impressed. This smaller than 10 milliseconds motion to photon latency. Another one is jitter. So always when you have augmented reality, and the tracking will use some probabilistic algorithms, right? So it's not always the same result, so there's some fuzziness. And because of this fuzziness, you can get jitter. So that means that the object, the computer graphics object, is not really static, but it's kind of shaking a little. And in the HoloLens, it's less than 1 millimeter jitter at 1 meter distance. So I think it's near the human detection threshold. So it means, yeah, the objects look rock solid. You cannot see that they shake. But now you wonder, isn't everything solved? And I can tell you no. And the example why this is not solved is this kind of game situation. We want to have a game which runs on a city scale. None of the things I showed you is working for that. Why is that? So, and basically the problem what you want is absolute positioning, right? So you want to know where are the AR glasses absolutely in space. So these two are not practical because we would need to put markers all over a city. It doesn't work, right? It's too much preparation effort. These, let's say PTAM. So PTAM is, you have all in your phones, yeah? So there's ARKit and AR Core. They are just re-implementations of PTAM. But you would think this solves everything, but no. So they are only relative. So this means the moment you start your AR application on your phone, from then on, it will give you, yeah, your phone now moved 3 millimeters to the left. Yes. But where it's absolutely in space, you don't know. None of these algorithms does that for you. And then also, the ideal thing that we want, yeah, it should have, if you imagine you have a 1 meter distance, a thing jitters 1 millimeter, this means my viewpoint should also jitter less than 1 millimeter. So this means, what do we need? So we need an absolute positioning system. So that gives us the 6 degrees of freedom, so position orientation of objects in the real world. And it should be instant on. So I turn it on, I know immediately where I am. No preparation effort for the environment, and millimeter accuracy range. And this is an incredible problem. This is incredibly difficult. And now as I'm learning about that, the other fields have that. So in robotics, they call this problem the kidnapped robot problem. Because it's, you take a robot, yeah, and you put the robot somewhere, turn the robot on, then the robot should tell us where it is instantly with very high precision. And in computer vision, they call this relocalization. And I'm sure there are 10 other fields that deal with this problem, and they all call it differently. So when we made this city-scale game in Japan, we tried a thing from Cambridge University called PoseNet. So it's using deep learning, right, and big data and so on. And it's quite neat, because what you can do is it basically detects things. It basically works for, let's say, campus. So on the Cambridge University campus, you can walk around, you take out your phone, you have one image, ping, it can tell you where you are. And it's robust against light changes, against change of seasons, right? Because it's using deep learning, so there is some fuzziness built in. But it didn't work well, yeah? So we tried it, and then the accuracy was maybe 10 centimeters. But 10 centimeters cannot work. It's much too imprecise. But now, I show you the shocking thing. In 2020, I saw this working. I saw a working solution to the kidnapped robot problem. So I visited one of the major Chinese IT companies. I cannot tell you which one, but okay, so I visited a major Chinese IT company, and they showed me a demo, yeah? And we could go around a big Chinese city, everywhere, turn on the phone, ping, and it's not using GPS, because GPS is much too inaccurate, so just image-based. And then I tried to talk with them, so how are you doing that? And of course, they didn't tell me directly how they do it, but I think I can guess. And I guess how they did it is, yeah, they used deep learning, but they had very good training data. So I think the data, roughly, that they had 1 year of non-stop video of all streets of that city. And when you have that data, it's a piece of cake to make a relocalizer or an absolute positioning system. Yeah, but this system, this will never be possible to develop in Europe, right? Because of GDPR, let's say. And so this is why I think we really need to look for China, what they are doing. And I don't know a good strategy how to compete as Europe against such power. But there is hope. So let's maybe now, the end of my talk, let's get to the hopeful parts. So when I mentioned all these breakthroughs that enabled major AR things, these are really 2 people that made that. There's one guy called Georg Klein. He made the PTAM, and then he's now the main guy making the HoloLens. And there's another guy called Richard Newcomb. He made the Kinect Fusion, and now he's in Meta, and he's making the Oculus 2 Go. So the tracking system in there, he made it. Now, these 2 guys. So these are European guys. One is British, one is Austrian. And they did their PhD in Cambridge and Oxford. And actually, so I think they are the intellectual grandchildren of Zimmermann and Hartley. So these are 2 mathematicians who made huge breakthroughs. Basically, they invented structure from motion. So it's a really big thing. But why could Cambridge University invent that? I think it's because it goes back to Isaac Newton. So they have this kind of history, that is very long history of mathematics, of very deep understanding. And they have this kind of culture. And this is something you could only do in Cambridge or Oxford, is my theory. So I think this history points to some good things. So I think Europe has a very good education system. And also, it's a possibility, we have the possibility to do this slow and fundamental research. Now, we can do 500 years mathematics, which we don't really know what it's good for, but then, wow, yeah, for solving the AR localization problem, this is how we do it. So there's some hope. But of course, also there's some concern, right? Because these are two top European guys, and they're both in America now. And probably they never come back to Europe. So, okay, I have 2 minutes left, good timing, also 2 slides left. So here I think some very good points in Europe. So I think we have a very good education. Also, we have the chance to do this very slow and fundamental research. Also, we have world-class small and medium companies. Okay, we don't have a Google in Europe, we don't have an Apple, but we have these kind of small, medium companies. Some of them are really world-class, which is, I think, advantage and also disadvantage, because it kind of fragments somehow the landscape in Europe. But then the European Research Council has a thing where you can basically connect networks of companies with universities. So as you can, maybe you can guess where I'm getting at. So basically my idea is Europe really, really needs a major AR initiative. And why is that not happening? So I have some theories. So I think one thing is I don't think that Brussels really understands what's happening in China. Yeah? I guess they look a little like at America and what are they doing, but they don't know what's happening in China. And I think it's crazy. Yeah? So all over the world, the AR and VR funding goes up, not for the European Research Council. European Research Council, AR, VR funding goes down. Strange. And what goes up a lot in Europe is the funding for AI projects. But as I explained, Europe is the worst place in the world to do AI research. Yes, so I hope to change that somehow. Okay, so it was the end of my talk. Thank you very much.